Materials used in this presentation are period in nature and used for educational and entertainment purposes. Furthermore, videos have been used in conjunction with the photographs to produce continuity, in some instances are composites, and fall within the purview of the fair use doctrine of U.S. copyright laws. Attributions are given when required. Welcome to A Moment in Crime, a feature vignette presented by the True Crime Man's Dark Imagination YouTube channel. If you've enjoyed this presentation or any other presentation on this channel, please hit like, subscribe, and hit the bell in order to receive notifications on any further offerings on this channel. A long time ago in a far-off land, young maidens disappeared at an alarming rate merely to serve the alleged bloodlust of a noblewoman who desired more than anything to be immortal. Or at least, that's what historians believed for a long period of time. What actually transpired had more to do with the period in history rather than a fairy tale designed to promote undead mythology. In reviewing the case of Countess Ezasebet Bathory, historians realized that she was no more than just a product of her time. Countess Ezasebet Bathory was born on August 7, 1560, and her family wielded great influence amongst the courts of Hungary. The Bathorys seemed to switch their allegiances to whomever may have been in power at the time. In 1571, the young countess found herself betrothed to a 15-year-old Ferenc Nadasdy. As was the custom of the time, when the betrothal became official, the young bride-to-be went to live with the groom's family, and they were responsible for her education. According to available sources, while living with the Nadasdys at this time, the young countess was taken advantage of on the banks of the Danube River by a servant or minor noble by the name of Ladislav Benda. When Ferenc discovered the indiscretion, he had the young man castrated and then, quote, torn apart by dogs, end quote. Allegedly, a daughter was born of the violent union and then sent away from the castle after her birth. Despite this intrigue, the couple were married when the groom reached 19 and the bride 15. This marriage served to maintain an alliance between the two families. After the marriage, Countess Bathory insisted on keeping her maiden name and thus signed all of her documents as, quote, Lady Bathory, end quote. She reasoned that her family was the older of the two and may wield more influence. Although we remember the Countess today as a murderer and a sadist, at the time she ruled her little corner of the Hungarian kingdom, she proved to be a Renaissance woman. Educated more than the average female within her realm, the Countess showed an overwhelming proficiency in mathematics, as well as writing, speaking, and reading Latin, German, and her native Hungarian. Her favorite subjects included biology, botany, anatomy, religion, and the occult. Proving capable to administer over the Bathory Nadasdy estates proved essential, as her husband was often away on military campaigns, and at the time, the Turkish satraps held the northern portions of Hungary and continued to attack the other areas of the country. The Countess's husband, Ferenc, demonstrated his violent prowess in combat with the Turks and received the moniker in 1578 of, quote, the Black Hero, end quote. While away on his campaigns, Countess Bathory kept a close watch on the family holdings and ruled her domain with a ruthless efficiency. When Ferenc was killed in an incursion with the Turks, it seemed that the Countess became even more determined to rule her lands with an iron fist and protect the people within it. Although history has portrayed Countess Bathory as a sadistic, evil, and mostly narcissistic ruler, she did at times exhibit concern for her subjects, especially when it came to protecting everyone, including herself, from the Turks. Furthermore, she concerned herself with the well-being of the serfs of the kingdom. In some cases, Countess Bathory interceded when it came to destitute women, and especially those whose husbands were off fighting the Turks. This characterization provided an interesting contrast to the way history would remember the Countess. Although Countess Bathory tried to maintain some sort of decorum in a time of violence, the times would eventually overtake her. She grew up in a time of revolts, warfare, and murder. In one particular instance, the young countess saw a man being executed through being sewed inside of a horse's belly. She laughed to herself as the man's head stuck out one last time. Even her own husband, Ferenc Nadasdy, frequently defiled the bodies of Turks conquered in battle by dancing with their dead corpses or playing a rudimentary form of catch with their severed heads. While away, Ferenc gave his young wife advice on how to discipline servants who had been disobedient. During one sojourn, when Ferenc briefly returned home, an unruly servant girl was forced to stand day and night in the heat of the summer covered with honey. She sustained various insect bites, and when she fell down due to exhaustion, Ferenc lit oiled pieces of paper between her toes to wake her up. The Countess expressed delight at such an incident. In 1602, a Lutheran minister in the town of Savar noticed that an inordinate amount of servant girls leaving the castle for burial. When questioned earlier about the large amount of bodies, Countess Bathory stated they died as a result of cholera. Rumors also began to circulate regarding some, quote, sealed chambers, end quote, that only the Countess and her inner circle were privy to at the time. More vicious rumors spread that the Countess was torturing and killing her servant girls in these rooms in the most grotesque ways. Countess Bathory allegedly whipped, beat, burned, and gouged out the flesh of the young girls. Sometimes, according to some accounts, she even bit their flesh, drawing blood. It seemed that the Countess relished in the torture, but possessed by rage, her torments exceeded that of human endurance. After several serious complaints were lodged with the authorities, because the girls were allegedly tortured and murdered were serfs, authorities paid little or no attention to the rumors. However, Countess Bathory opened a finishing school for young noblewomen in 1610. Suddenly, officials became concerned when the likes of the upper classes seemed to disappear and then reappear as corpses from the castle. In an effort to get to the bottom of the deaths, local noble families went to the king, Matthias II, King of Hungary, to pursue an investigation. Of course, authorities believed that with such a volume of dead young women, noble and serf alike, the Countess had to have assistance. Countess Bathory had many servants who would procure the young ladies and even participate in the tortures and then murders. One of them, known as Anna Darolya, nicknamed Davulya, was said to have coerced the Countess into learning newer, more ghastly torture techniques. Some said that when Darvulya entered a room at the castle where young girls would be held, the Countess became, quote, crueler and crueler, end quote. The other staff included Ilona Jo, the Countess's former wet nurse, Duratna Cervantes, Katalin Bensky, and a young man named Janos Ushvari, or Fishko, meaning kid. All of them later confessed to assisting the Countess with her sadistic desires. When confronted later, Countess Bathory stated that she allowed the servants to do what they wished, as even she was afraid of them. Some other noble women were involved as well, obtaining the girls for the almost nightly torture sessions. With the evidence mounting, the authorities stood ready to make the motley crew, including the Countess, pay for their transgressions. With these accusations appearing to hold validity, Matthias II ordered an investigation under the auspices of Georgi Turzo, who, ironically, had been pressed for the protection of the Countess after Ferenc's death. Between March and July 1610, Turzo and his men interviewed 52 witnesses, of which 34 were servant girls who worked in the castles surrounding the Countess's abode. Quote, they told lurid tales of bruised and beaten young women, stripped and left to die of exposure, end quote. Although this, quote, testimony, end quote, was taken with all seriousness, in all reality, the witnesses merely just repeated hearsay. In the castle at Savar, one of the servants claimed to know the location of the secret chambers, and he, too, stated that he witnessed various tortures occurring at the castle. But when doctors were called to the castle to examine sick girls, they never reported the girls as having any marks on them whatsoever. Turzo went to the Cathay Castle on December 30th, 1610, and arrested Countess Bathory based upon the allegations. Turzo claimed to have captured the Countess in the act of torturing and bloodletting a young servant girl, but no historical documentation exists to support Turzo's claim. What Turzo did discover at the castle was the dead body of a young girl and another one that had been tortured by the Countess and her flesh ripped from certain parts of her body by the castle warden. The servant girl later denied the claims about the torture, but Turzo gave the young girl 50 guilders, 15 pounds of wheat, and a small farm as free property. In order to implicate the Countess further, Turzo set about to torture the henchmen surrounding the Countess. Although they tried to implicate Darvulia since she was already deceased, when the pain increased, each of the henchmen pointed the finger toward the Countess. The torture victims stated that the Countess murdered between 30 and 50 young girls during the course of her reign. The figure of 650 victims comes from an illiterate servant girl, and as far as historical accuracy is concerned, may be discounted. One thing that has been dispelled as a myth now that the historical record can be corrected is that the Countess Bathory never bathed in the blood of servant girls. This rumor began when a Jesuit scholar named Laszlo Turoczy researched the Bathory case, and when he traveled to different parts of Hungary for research, heard the rumors of the blood bathing and included it within his book. During the course of the next several hundred years, no accounts of the Countess bathing in blood could be found, nor had anyone mentioned it in their surviving testimony. When the Countess first heard of the charges against her, she tried to counter them in saying that Turzo made everything up. In August of 1610, Countess Bathory brought to a nearby court in Eisenberg the mother of one of the dead girls allegedly murdered by the Countess. The girl's mother testified that her daughter died of natural causes and not at the hands of the Countess, but the judges and Turzo refused to accept the woman's statement. Seeing that she lived on borrowed time, Countess Bathory made out her will where she left the remaining Bathory Nadazhdy holdings to her 3 children, Anna, Catalin, and Paul. The only thing she kept for herself was her wedding dress that she swore she would wear up until her death. The Countess hoped to cut off any attempts by her sons-in-law to see her put away and her family left penniless. Furthermore, other interested parties possessed an interest in seeing Countess Bathory convicted and then punished for her alleged misdeeds. For years, Ferenc Nadazhdy lent money to the Hungarian crown, who never made any effort to pay the debt back. The Countess made herself very unpopular with recurrent trips to the royal court to persuade them to repay the debt. Quote, King Matthias II knew that if he could convict Elizabeth of the crime, he would not only wipe his debt to her, but could also claim her vast estates. End quote. The sovereign believed he could solve his money problems and remove a troublesome woman at the same time. Furthermore, King Matthias hoped to lessen and even eliminate the Bathory clan power. More importantly, Gabor Bathory, Prince of Transylvania, hoped to consolidate his throne with that of Hungary, thus improving his power base and growing his empire. Matthias knew that the Countess had been financing the prince for some time. If Matthias could remove the Countess, he would quell a threat to his throne. Turzo determined that Countess Bathory should not have a trial, as her crimes were indeed serious enough to warrant immediate execution. He told her this when he, along with some of her relatives, went to visit her in the prison where she was being held. When she implored Turzo for her to have a trial where she believed she could absolve herself of the crime she stood accused, Turzo rebuffed her again by stating,
You, Ezasebet, are like a wild animal. You do not deserve to breathe the air on earth or see the light of the Lord. You shall disappear in this world and shall never reappear in it again.
Under Hungarian law, an act of their parliament was required to bring someone of the Countess's standing to trial. Turzo believed he could accomplish the ends of the court without a trial, taking into consideration the seriousness of her crimes. Turzo convinced King Matthias that a trial would not be in the best interest of the crown, as to prosecute the widow of such a revered national hero such as Ferenc Nadasdy would prove detrimental to the nobles as well as the king himself. As a result of the trials of the servants, except for Darvulia, who had died in 1609, all of them were tried and executed. 2 of them had their fingers torn out before the executioner burnt their bodies. Fitzko lost his head. Another woman, an alleged witch, was implicated in the crimes as well and suffered a burning. Most of the noble women who either procured the girls or participated in their ritual slaughter were never brought to justice. As for the Countess, King Matthias ordered Countess Bathory to be contained within the walls of Chethei Castle, and but for the exception of an occasional visit from her daughter, and Terzo's wife to steal her jewels, Countess Bathory languished alone with the exception of a guard to watch her. Elizabeth Bathory died on August 14th, 1614. Many tales have been told regarding the, quote, bloody countess, end quote, and history has been unfair in some instances. But one thing has been for certain. Countess Bathory may have deserved her moniker for the cruelty and sadistic behavior she exhibited, but that behavior can only be attributed to the age in which she lived rather than a myth of her bloodletting. This has been A Moment in Crime. If you've enjoyed this presentation or any other presentation on this channel, please hit like, subscribe, and hit the bell in order to receive notifications on any further offerings on this channel.